That pink-wearing she-devil Karen laughed as her goons tore into my daddy's 80-year-old apple trees, staking a damn HOA property sign right in my dirt. My blood boiled hotter than a branding iron, my fists aching to settle this the old way. I'm John Harrison, a 65-year-old cowboy farmer who stared down blizzards, bandits, and broken dreams, and this is my fight against the slickest, greediest HOA Karen in Oregon, Karen Mitchell. She thought she'd run me off my land with forged papers and a smirk. She's about to learn you don't cross a man who's got nothing left to lose. Welcome to HOA Karen Files, where we spit in the face of bullies and root for the righteous. Hit that subscribe button, slam that bell, and saddle up for a tale of grit, vengeance, and a cowboy's justice that'll make you holler. I ain't one for crowds or crying for help. A cowboy handles his own, and that's how I've lived my 65 years. My spread's a 50-acre apple orchard in Oregon's Willamette Valley, a hard-won patch of heaven my daddy, Amos Harrison, carved from rock and sweat in '45. He was a mean old cuss, hands rough as saddle leather, heart tough as iron, planting them first trees after coming home from the war. Those trees grew into giants, their apples so crisp they'd bring a tear to your eye. Their cider taking ribbons at every fair from here to Portland. Folks called him Apple Amos, and this orchard wasn't just land. It was our blood, our bones. My wife Ellie, God rest her, loved it like her own heart. We'd ride them rows at dusk, her laugh carrying on the breeze, planning for grandkids to climb them branches. Cancer took her 4 years back, leaving a hole in me wider than this valley. When Daddy passed 2 years ago, the orchard fell to me. I swore on their graves I'd keep it alive, keep it ours no matter what. I'm a farmer, a cowboy, with dirt in my veins and a stubborn streak that'd make a mule blush. But I didn't reckon on a fight like this. A mile off sits the Pine Ridge HOA, a sprawl of shiny McMansions and city folks who look at my orchard like it's a stain on their polished world. They ain't neighbors. They're vultures, developers who turned good soil into a fake paradise. I'd heard tales of their dirty deeds, fining folks for unpainted barns, bullying farmers to sell for pennies. I kept my distance, tending my trees, thinking they'd leave me be. That was my mistake. It all kicked off one October morning, the air sharp with frost, the kind of day that makes a man glad to be breathing. I was checking apples, my Stetson tipped low, when the scream of chainsaws hit me like a bullet. I tore toward the sound, boots pounding the dirt, and what I saw damn near broke me. A crew in orange vests was hacking down my oldest trees, 80-year-olds Daddy planted, their branches crashing like thunder. They'd cut 15, leaving stumps bleeding sap, and a wooden sign was staked in my soil. HOA property in red letters, bold as a slap. I roared, "What in the hell are you doing?" A woman stepped up, 50-something, blonde hair teased high, wearing a pink blazer and skirt brighter than a whorehouse sign. Karen Mitchell, president of Pine Ridge HOA, her sunglasses perched like she owned the damn sun, her smile sharper than a Bowie knife. "Mr. Harrison," she said, all sugar and venom, "this land's ours now. These trees are on HOA property." I was thunderstruck. "Lady, I ain't in your damn HOA. This is my land." She waved a clipboard, her pink nails flashing. "Records say different. Clear out or we'll fine you." My blood burned, my hands itching to settle this right then. But I ain't a fool. I was facing a snake in pink, and snakes don't die easy. I stormed back to the farmhouse, the floorboards groaning under my boots, and yanked Daddy's deed from a tin box under the bed. That paper, yellowed as an old bone, laid it out clear. Harrison land, free and clear since '45. I saddled up my old Chevy, the deed stuffed in my coat, and rode to the county office. Found a clerk named Pete, a wiry kid with a nervous tic and a quick mind. He pulled up my property and frowned, chewing his pen. "Says your land's under Pine Ridge HOA," he said. "Boundary shift filed last year." I slammed the deed down, my voice low. "That's horse shit, Pete. My daddy didn't sign nothing." He dug deeper, his eyes narrowing, and then he froze. "This ain't right," he muttered. showing me a document with Daddy's signature, dated 6 months after we laid him in the ground. Forged, plain as day. They snuck this through during probate, Pete said, his voice hushed. Dirty as sin. I felt like I'd been gut punched, my head spinning. Can you prove it's fake? I asked. Pete nodded, his jaw tight. I'll try, John, but watch yourself. These HOA folks are meaner than a cornered rattler. I left with a fire in my belly, knowing this wasn't just a fight for land. It was a fight for my name. I didn't need no crowd to settle this. A cowboy don't cry for help. He loads his gun and rides. But first, I needed answers. I rode to Pine Ridge's clubhouse, a glass and steel eyesore that looked like it belonged in a damn city, not my valley. The receptionist, all perfume and fake smiles, tried to shoo me, but I pushed past, my boots tracking mud on their shiny floor. Karen was in her office, sipping coffee from a pink mug, her heels propped on a desk like she was queen of the world. She didn't stand, just smirked. Mr. Harrison, come to beg? I leaned in, my voice hard as flint. You forged my daddy's name, Karen. This land's mine, and I'll be damned if you steal it. She slid a $5,000 fine across the desk, her nails tapping. Unapproved crops, she said, her voice dripping scorn. Pay, or we'll take your tractor. I laughed, a low, bitter sound. You're a thief in pink, lady, and I'm going to end you. Her smirk didn't budge. Try it, cowboy. Court's pricey, and we don't lose? I turned on my heel, my blood pounding like a war drum, knowing I'd just thrown down with a woman who'd sell her own kin for a dime. Back at the ranch, I sat on the porch, Ellie's empty rocker creaking in the wind, the orchard stretching out like a map of my life. I saw her smile, felt her hand in mine, heard Daddy's voice telling me to hold this land tight. This wasn't just dirt. It was them. It was me. I wasn't fighting for apples. I was fighting for my family's soul. Karen wasn't going to wait, though. 2 nights later, I woke to a crash louder than a dynamite blast. I grabbed my shotgun, not to kill, just to make a point, and ran outside, the cold biting my bones. A bulldozer was tearing through my north fence, splinters flying like shrapnel. A crew was planting more HOA property signs, their floodlights burning my eyes. I bellowed, "Get the hell off my land!" The foreman, a weaselly fellow with Karen's clipboard, shrugged. "HOA orders," he said, like that settled it. I raised my shotgun, fired a warning shot into the sky, the boom echoing like God's own hammer. They scattered like roaches, but the damage was done. My fence was gone, and my orchard was a battlefield. I stood there, breath fogging in the night, knowing this was war. But I didn't need no internet or news to fight it. This was my land, my fight, and I'd handle it my way. Next morning, I rode into town, my old pickup rattling like a tin can. I stopped by the feed store where my buddy Hank, a grizzled farmer with a face like old leather, was loading sacks. "Heard about your trouble, John," he said, spitting tobacco. "That Karen's a viper." I nodded, my jaw tight. "She's trying to steal my orchard, Hank. Forged my daddy's name." His eyes narrowed. "You need help. I'm there." I shook my head. "This is my fight, partner. But if you hear anything about her dirty dealings, you let me know." Hank grinned, his teeth stained brown. "Reckon I might. Word is, she's been bullying other farmers, too." I tipped my hat and rode on, my mind racing. Karen wasn't just after me. She was a plague, and I'd be the one to burn her out. 3 days later, she hit harder. I was out mending the busted fence, my hands blistered from hammering posts, when I smelled something foul. I followed it to my irrigation ditch, where the water ran black, stinking of chemicals. My trees, damn near 100, were wilting, their leaves curling like they'd been cursed. I scooped some water, the stench burning my nose, and knew it was herbicide, dumped deliberate. My knees buckled, the orchard blurring through my tears. These weren't just trees. They were Ellie's joy, Daddy's pride, and they were dying. I didn't call no sheriff or cry to no one. I saddled my horse, Rusty, and rode the property line, looking for tracks. Found them, tire marks from a heavy truck, leading toward Pine Ridge. Karen's work, no doubt. I rode back, my shotgun slung across my back, and started planning. A cowboy don't wait for help. He strikes. That night, I snuck onto Pine Ridge land, moving quiet like I used to when hunting coyotes. Their clubhouse was lit up, Karen's pink Cadillac parked out front. I crept close, hiding in the shadows, and overheard her talking to a suit, a lawyer by the look of him. "Harrison's stubborn," she said, her voice sharp. "If he won't sell, we'll make his land worthless. Poison the water, cut the trees, whatever it takes." The suit chuckled. "And the forged deed?" Karen laughed, cold as ice. "It'll hold. By the time he fights it, we'll have our mall built." My blood ran hot, but I stayed still, listening. They were planning to turn my orchard into a damn shopping center. I slipped away, my mind set. Karen wasn't just a thief. She was a devil, and I'd send her to hell myself. Next day, I rode to the county office again, the deed in my pocket. Pete was there, looking jumpier than a jackrabbit. "John, I dug deeper," he whispered, sliding me a stack of papers. "Karen's HOA's been faking deeds for years, stealing land from 5 other farmers. Found a surveyor, Earl, who worked for her. He's got proof, maps, emails, all of it." I leaned in, my voice low. "Can he talk?" Pete swallowed hard. "He's scared, John. Karen's got powerful friends, but I'll get him to you." I nodded, tucking the papers in my coat. "Keep this quiet, Pete. This is my fight." He nodded, his eyes wide. "Be careful, John. She's dangerous." I tipped my hat and walked out, the papers burning a hole in my pocket. Karen thought she'd outsmarted me, but I was loading my guns, and I don't miss. Back at the ranch, I walked the orchard, the wilted trees like a wound in my soul. I stopped at Ellie's favorite tree, a gnarled old giant she'd sit under, reading her books. I touched its bark, my voice breaking. "I ain't letting her win, darling. Not now, not ever." But Karen kept coming. That night, I heard a low hum overhead. I stepped outside, the moon high, and saw drones, 3 of them, red lights blinking like devil eyes, circling my land. I grabbed my shotgun, took aim, and blasted one out of the sky. It crashed in a shower of sparks, a Pine Ridge logo on its side. Karen was watching me, spying like a coward. I stomped the wreckage, my voice a growl. "Come at me yourself, you pink snake." The other drones fled, but I knew she'd be back. She wasn't fighting fair, but neither would I. The next week was a siege. I found my water tank slashed, gushing like a river, flooding my south field. I worked till dawn to plug it, my hands raw, my back aching. Then came the fines: $6,000 for unapproved fencing, $3,000 for non-compliant crops, all signed by Karen, her pink signature like a taunt. I burned them in my fire pit, watching the flames eat her lies. One morning, I caught a crew sneaking onto my land, trying to uproot my saplings. I rode up on Rusty, shotgun in hand, and fired another warning shot. "Next one's in your ass," I hollered. They ran, leaving tools and more damn HOA property signs. I tore them down, my hands shaking with rage. Karen wasn't just stealing, she was trying to break me, to grind my spirit to dust. She didn't know I was forged in harder fires than this. I started fighting back cowboy style. I rigged traps along my property line. Tripwires with bells, old bear traps from Daddy's shed. Nothing lethal, but enough to spook her goons. One night I caught a fella in an orange vest, howling when his foot hit a trap. I loomed over him, my shotgun glinting. "Tell Karen she's poking a grizzly," I growled. He nodded, eyes wide, and limped off. I let him go. Fear's a better weapon than blood. I also started tracking her crew, riding Rusty through the hills to spot their trucks. Found a stash of herbicide cans in a ditch near Pine Ridge, marked with their logo. I hauled them to my barn, evidence for when I'd take her down. Every night I patrolled my land, my dog Buck at my side, his growl low and mean. Karen wanted a war. She'd get one. One evening I rode into town for supplies, my hat low to keep eyes off me. At the diner, I overheard 2 old farmers talking low. "Karen's pushing to rezone the whole valley," one said. "Wants a mall, condos, the works." The other spat. "She's bribing county folks. Got a surveyor in her pocket, too. My ears pricked up. That surveyor had to be Earl. I didn't join their talk. Cowboys don't beg for gossip, but I filed it away. Back home, I sat by the fire, cleaning my shotgun, thinking of Ellie. "This is our land, darling," I whispered. "I'll burn her empire down before she takes it." The orchard was quiet, but I felt the fight coming, heavy as a storm. Then Pete came through. He showed up at dawn looking like he hadn't slept, a manila envelope in his hand. "John, I got Earl to talk," he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. "He's got maps showing Karen's fake boundaries, emails where she brags about bribing a county man named Vance. It's enough to bury her, but she's got eyes everywhere." I took the envelope, my heart kicking like a Mustang. "Where's Earl now?" I asked. Pete swallowed. "Hiding. Karen threatened his family." I nodded, my voice steady. "Tell him to stay low. This is my fight, and I'll finish it." Pete looked at me, half scared, half awed. "You're crazy, John." I grinned, hard and cold. "Crazy's what it takes." I tucked the envelope in my safe, knowing it was dynamite. Karen thought she'd outfoxed me, but I was closing in, and I'd strike when she least expected. What Earl gave me, and what Karen didn't know I had, was gonna light a fire she couldn't put out. Stick around for part 2, 'cause this cowboy's got a reckoning coming, and it's gonna be meaner than a twister in July. Subscribe to HOA Karen Files. Hit that bell and toss your own HOA horror stories in the comments. Let's run these Karens out of the valley together. That pink-clad Karen thought she'd scare me off with poisoned water and burned trees, but I'm coming for her with proof that'll burn her HOA empire to ash. My blood's boiling, my shotgun's loaded, and I ain't backing down. I'm John Harrison, a 65-year-old cowboy farmer who's faced worse than a conniving HOA snake like Karen Mitchell. She's trying to steal my daddy's 80-year-old orchard with forged papers and dirty tricks. But this old dog's got teeth, and I'm about to bite. Welcome to HOA Karen Files, where we spit on bullies and cheer the fighters. Hit that subscribe button, slam that bell, and saddle up for a tale of grit, secrets, and a cowboy's vengeance that'll make you holler for justice. I was sitting on my porch, Ellie's empty rocker creaking in the breeze, that manila envelope from Pete burning a hole in my hands. Inside were maps and emails, proof that Karen Mitchell and her Pine Ridge HOA had been stealing land from farmers for years, faking deeds, bribing county men, and laughing all the way to the bank. My orchard, 50 acres of apple trees my daddy, Amos Harrison, planted in '45, was just the latest prize in her greedy claws. She'd already cut my trees, poisoned my water, and tore down my fence, staking HOA property signs like daggers in my soil. But I ain't one for crying or calling for help. A cowboy settles his own scores, and I was gonna bury Karen my way. I tucked the envelope in my safe, grabbed my Stetson, and got to work. This wasn't just a fight for my land. It was a fight for Ellie, for Daddy, for every inch of dirt we'd bled for. First, I needed Earl, the surveyor Pete mentioned. He was hiding, scared of Karen's threats, but he had the keys to her downfall. I rode into town at dawn, my old Chevy rattling like a loose saddle. Pete met me at the diner, looking like he hadn't slept in a week, his eyes darting like a spooked colt. "Earl's at a motel off Route 12, he whispered, sliding me a scrap of paper with an address. "He's jumpy, John. Karen's got men watching him." I nodded, my jaw tight. "She ain't watching me." "Keep your head down, Pete." I tipped my hat and rode out, the address burned in my mind. The motel was a rundown joint, neon sign flickering like a dying star. I knocked on Earl's door, my boots scuffing the gravel. He opened it a crack, a skinny fella in his 50s, gray hair wild, eyes wide as a hunted deer. "You John Harrison?" he rasped. I nodded, keeping my voice low. "Heard you got something on Karen Mitchell." He glanced over my shoulder, then pulled me inside, locking the door. "I worked for her," he said, hands shaking. "Drew fake maps, moved boundaries, made her land grabs look legal. She paid me good, but when I wanted out, she threatened my kids." He handed me a USB drive, his fingers trembling. Emails, maps, recordings. It's all there. She bribed a county man, Vance, to push her deeds through. They're planning a mall on your orchard. My blood ran hot, but I kept steady. You'll testify? I asked. He swallowed hard. If you keep her off me. Nuff. I gripped his shoulder, my voice hard. Stay hid, Earl. I'll handle the rest. I left with the USB, knowing I had dynamite in my pocket. But Karen wasn't going to sit still while I lit the fuse. Back at the ranch, I locked the USB with Pete's envelope, my mind racing. Karen was playing dirty, and I had to match her step for step. I saddled Rusty, my old horse, and rode the property line, checking my traps. Tripwires with bells, bear traps from Daddy's shed. They'd already caught 2 of her goons, sent 'em limping back to Pine Ridge. But Karen upped the ante. One morning, I woke to the stench of smoke, sharp and acrid. I ran outside, my boots half on, and saw flames licking the edge of my orchard. A row of young apple trees was burning, the fire creeping toward my barn, its orange glow dancing like a demon. I grabbed a shovel and a hose, battling the blaze alone, my lungs burning, my hands blistered. Took me 2 hours to kill it, but I lost 20 trees and a chunk of my barn's wall. I found a gasoline-soaked rag in the ashes, proof it was arson. No sheriff needed. This had Karen's pink stink all over it. I tossed the rag in my evidence pile, my voice a growl. You want to play with fire, lady? I'll burn you down. I wasn't waiting for her next move. I rode to the county records office, my coat stuffed with Pete's papers and Earl's USB. I didn't trust no one but myself to dig deeper. The clerk, a new gal named Lila, let me into the archives after hours, owing me a favor from when I helped her daddy fix a tractor. I spent 3 nights poring over dusty files, my flashlight bouncing off faded deeds. Found gold, a 10-year-old survey showing my orchard's true boundaries, signed by a dead county man who couldn't be bribed. It matched Earl's maps, proving Karen's boundary shift was a lie. I also found a canceled check from Pine Ridge to Vance, the county official, for $10,000, marked consulting. Bribe money clear as day. I copied it all, my hands steady, knowing I was building a noose for Karen's neck. But I wasn't ready to hang her yet. I needed more. Karen didn't let up. One night I caught a drone buzzing over my orchard, its red lights blinking like a devil's eyes. I grabbed my shotgun, took aim, and blasted it to pieces, the wreckage crashing in my dirt. Pine Ridge logo, just like before. I smashed it with my boot, my voice low. Keep spying, Karen. You'll see what's coming. 2 days later, I found my water tank slashed again, flooding my south field, drowning my tree's roots. I worked till midnight to fix it, my back screaming, my hands raw. Then came more fines, $7,000 for unapproved irrigation, $4,000 for non-compliant barn, all signed with Karen's pink scrawl. I burned them in my fire pit, the flames eating her lies. She was trying to bleed me dry, to break my spirit. She didn't know I was forged in harder fires than this. I kept fighting cowboy style. I rigged more traps, sharpened stakes under leaves, old barbed wire stretched low. Caught another goon, his legs snagged, howling like a coyote. I stood over him, my shotgun glinting. Tell Karen she's messing with the wrong man, I said. He nodded, pale as death, and I let him crawl off. Fear's a sharp blade, and I was cutting deep. I also started shadowing her crew, riding Rusty through the hills at dusk, my eyes sharp. Spotted a truck dumping more herbicide near my ditch, Pine Ridge plates clear as day. I followed it to a warehouse on their land, hiding in the brush. Inside, I saw barrels of chemicals, stacks of HOA property signs, and a map with my orchard circled in red, labeled Mall Phase 1. My blood burned, but I stayed cool, slipping away with a plan brewing. Karen was building an empire on my dirt, but I'd tear it down brick by brick. One evening, I rode into town for ammo, keeping my hat low. At the bar, I overheard 2 farmers talking low. Karen's got the county in her pocket, one said, spitting tobacco. Paid Vance to rezone the valley for her mall. The other nodded. Heard she's got a lawyer, Holt, covering her tracks. I didn't join him. Cowboys don't beg for talk. but I filed it away. Holt was the suit I'd heard with Karen, and Vance was the key to her bribes. I rode home, my mind racing. I needed to get to Vance, but first I had to protect my land. I spent the next day fortifying the orchard, nailing up new fences, setting more traps, and moving my evidence to a lockbox buried under the barn. Buck, my dog, stayed close, his growl low, sensing the fight coming. Then trouble hit hard. One night I woke to a crash, louder than a thunderclap. I grabbed my shotgun and ran outside. The moon cast in shadows like ghosts. My cider press, $10,000 worth of steel, was smashed, oil poured over it, ruining it for good. A note was pinned to the wreckage. Sell or burn. I crumpled it, my voice a snarl. You want to burn, Karen? I'll light the match. I didn't call no sheriff or tell no one. This was my war, and I'd fight it alone. But I wasn't dumb. I knew I needed more than traps and grit. I rode to Lila's house, the clerk who'd helped me before. She let me in, her eyes wide. John, you're stirring a hornet's nest, she said. I nodded, handing her a list. Need records on Vance, the county man. Anything linking him to Karen. She hesitated, then nodded. For you, John, I'll look. But be careful. I tipped my hat and left, knowing I was walking a razor's edge. Lila came through 2 days later, slipping me a file at the feed store, her hands shaking. Vance took $50,000 from Pine Ridge over 3 years, she whispered. Bank records, emails, all here. He's dirty, John. I tucked the file in my coat, my heart pounding. You're a good woman, Lila. Stay clear of this now. She nodded, her eyes scared. I rode home, the file burning like a hot coal. It was proof, hard proof, that Karen's empire was built on lies and bribes. But I needed one more piece to nail her. I went back to Earl's motel, knocking late, my hat low. He was paler than before, his hands shaking worse. They're watching me, John, he said, voice breaking. Karen's men, every day. I leaned in, my voice steady. Give me something to end her, Earl. One shot. He swallowed, then handed me a recording, a tape of Karen bragging to Vance about faking my deed, laughing about breaking that cowboy. I gripped the tape, my blood singing. Stay hid, Earl. This ends soon. I left, knowing I had her by the throat, but Karen was about to play her dirtiest card yet. That night, I heard hooves, real ones, not Rusty's. I stepped outside, shotgun ready, and saw my north field glowing orange. Fire bigger than before, roaring through my orchard, eating 50 trees like kindling. I ran toward it, my heart pounding, shovel in hand, but it was too big, too fast. I fought till dawn, my lungs choking, my face black with soot. But I lost half my north orchard and my old shed. In the ashes, I found another gasoline rag, same as before, and a new note. Last warning. Sure, I crushed it, my voice a growl. You're done, Karen. I didn't need no one else. This was my land, my fight, and I'd end it. But what I found in that fire, and what Karen didn't know I had, was gonna light a fuse that'd blow her world apart. Stick around for part 3, cause this cowboy's riding into the final showdown, and it's gonna be bloodier than a saloon brawl. Subscribe to HOA Karen Files. Hit that bell and toss your own HOA horror stories in the comments. Let's run these Karens out of the valley together. That pink-wearing Karen thought she'd burn my orchard to ash and walk away with my land, but I've got proof that'll hang her HOA empire by the neck. My blood's hotter than a forge, my shotgun's primed, and I'm ready to end this. I'm John Harrison, a 65-year-old cowboy farmer who's faced down hell itself, and this is my final stand against Karen Mitchell, the greediest, most conniving HOA snake in Oregon. She's tried to steal my daddy's 80-year-old orchard with forged papers, poison, and fire, but this old cowboy's got one last fight in him, and it's gonna be a reckoning. Welcome to HOA Karen Files, where we bury bullies and raise a flag for the fighters. Hit that subscribe button, slam that bell, and saddle up for a tale of grit, justice, and a cowboy's vengeance that'll leave you cheering. I stood in the ashes of my north orchard, the air thick with soot, my hands blistered from fighting a fire that ate 50 of my trees. That gasoline rag and note, Last warning were Karen Mitchell's calling card, her way of saying she'd break me. She was wrong. In my lockbox, I had dynamite, Earl's USB with fake maps and recordings, Pete's papers, proven forged deeds, Lila's file on Vance's bribes, and a tape of Karen bragging about stealing my land. My 50-acre orchard built by my daddy Amos Harrison in '45 was more than dirt. It was Ellie's laugh, Daddy's sweat, my whole damn life. Karen's Pine Ridge HOA had cut my trees, poisoned my water, burned my fields, and staked HOA property signs like knives in my heart. But I don't cry and I don't beg. A cowboy settles his own scores, and I was going to bury Karen so deep she'd never crawl out. I started with Vance, the county man taking Karen's bribes. I rode to his fancy house at dusk, my Chevy's engine growling low. He was on his porch, sipping whiskey, looking smug as a cat with a mouse. I stepped out, my Stetson low, shotgun slung over my shoulder. "Vance," I said, voice hard as iron, "we need to talk about Karen Mitchell." His glass froze halfway to his lips, his eyes darting. "Don't know what you mean," he stammered. I pulled Lila's file from my coat, tossing it at his feet. 50,000 in bribes, bank records, emails. You're dirty, and I got proof. He paled, sweat beading on his brow. "What do you want?" he whined. I leaned in, my shadow falling over him. "Testify against her, or I take this to the feds." He nodded, shaking like a leaf. "I'll do it, Harrison. Just keep my name quiet." I tipped my hat, leaving him to stew. One down, but Karen was the real prize. Back at the ranch, I fortified my defenses. I rebuilt the burned shed, nailed up stronger fences, and set more traps. Barbed wire, sharpened stakes, bells to catch her goons. Karen didn't wait long to hit again. One morning, I found my tractor gutted, wires cut, fuel tank drained. A new note was pinned to the seat. "Sell or die." I crushed it, my voice a snarl. "Come at me, you pink snake." I fixed the tractor myself, working till midnight, my hands black with grease. Then came the drones. 5 of them now, buzzing over my orchard at night, red lights blinking like demons. I took out 2 with my shotgun, their wreckage piling up in my barn, all marked Pine Ridge. Karen was watching, planning, but I was ready. I moved my evidence to a new spot, a steel box buried under Ellie's favorite tree, the one she'd read under. "Keep this safe, darling," I whispered, touching the bark. This wasn't just a fight, it was a war, and I'd win it for her. I needed to tighten the noose. I rode to Earl's motel again, moving quiet under a new moon. He was a wreck, chain-smoking, his eyes bloodshot. "They're closing in, John," he rasped. "Karen's men followed me yesterday." I handed him a burner phone, my voice steady. "You're testifying, Earl. I'll keep you safe, but you gotta stand tall." He nodded, clutching the phone like a lifeline. "I recorded her last week," he said, handing me another tape. "She's planning to frame you for arson, say you burned your own trees for insurance." My blood burned, but I grinned, cold and hard. She's digging her own grave. I left, the tape in my pocket, knowing I had enough to hang her, if I could get to court. Karen played her dirtiest card yet. One night, I heard a low rumble, like a stampede. I ran outside, shotgun ready, and saw a bulldozer, bigger than before, tearing through my south orchard, crushing 30 trees like they were matchsticks. A crew was planting more HOA property signs. Their floodlights blinded me. I fired a warning shot, the boom echoing, but they didn't scatter. A new fella stepped up, a hired thug, built like a brick wall, holding Karen's clipboard. "This is HOA land," he growled. "Leave, or we bury you." I aimed my shotgun at his chest, my voice ice. "Try it, and you're the one in the dirt." He smirked but backed off, the crew retreating. I stood there, breath fogging in the cold, watching them go. They'd left a new sign, bigger, red letters screaming Pine Ridge Mall, coming soon. I tore it down, my hands shaking with rage. Karen wasn't just stealing. She was mocking me, daring me to fight. I'd take that dare and shove it down her throat. I knew court was my only shot to end this legal like. I didn't trust lawyers. Too many words, not enough spine. but I needed one. I rode to town, asking around quiet, and found Clara, a retired attorney who'd tangled with HOAs before. She was 70, sharp as a tack, with a voice like gravel and a hate for Karens. I met her at her cabin, laying out my evidence. Earl's tapes, Pete's papers, Lila's file, the herbicide cans, the drone wreckage. Her eyes lit up, a wolf smelling blood. "This ain't just fraud," she said, slapping the table. "It's racketeering, conspiracy, the works. We'll bury her." I nodded, my jaw tight. "I don't want no circus, Clara. Just her head on a pike." She grinned, pouring me whiskey. "You'll get it, cowboy." We filed a lawsuit that day. Forgery, trespass, sabotage, arson, racketeering. Clara called it a silver bullet, and I was aiming it at Karen's heart. Karen fought back like a cornered cat. The next day I got served papers, her HOA suing me for defamation and trespass on their land. Pure gall, but I expected no less. Then came the goons. One night I caught two of them sneaking toward my barn, carrying gas cans. I fired a warning shot, then tackled one, my fist meeting his jaw. He went down hard, his buddy running. I tied him to a fence post, my voice low. "Tell Karen her time's up." He nodded, blood dripping, and I let him limp off. The next morning, I found my mailbox stuffed with threats, $10,000 fines, notices of eminent domain. I burned them all, the flames reflecting in my eyes. Karen was desperate, and desperate snakes strike wild. Clara worked fast, lining up witnesses. Vance agreed to testify, scared of the feds more than Karen. Earl was ready, hiding in a safe spot I'd set up in the hills. Lila handed over more records, showing Karen's shell companies laundering bribe money. I kept patrolling my orchard, shotgun in hand, buck at my side, his growl keeping me sharp. One evening, I caught a glint in the trees, binoculars, watching me. I fired a shot into the brush, hearing a yelp as the spy fled. Karen was scared, and I could smell it, but she had one last trick. 2 days before court, I woke to a roar. Another fire, this time at my farmhouse. Flames licked the porch, creeping toward the roof. I fought it with a hose, my lungs choking, my hands burning. Took me till dawn, but I saved the house, losing only the porch and half my tool shed. Another gasoline rag, another note. "You're done." I laughed, bitter and hard. "Not yet, Karen." Court day came, the sky heavy with rain. I walked into the courthouse, my boots echoing. Clara at my side, my evidence in a steel case. The room was packed. Farmers, shopkeepers, folks who'd heard of my fight. Karen sat at the defense table, pink blazer crisp, smirking like she'd already won. Her lawyer, Holt, was a slick city boy, all teeth and lies. Judge Ellen Baxter, a no-nonsense woman with steel gray hair, took the bench, her gavel hitting like a hammer. Clara laid it all out, the forged deed with Daddy's fake signature, Earl's maps showing fake boundaries, Lila's bank records proving Vance's bribes, the herbicide cans, the drone wreckage, the gasoline rags. She played Earl's tape, Karen's voice echoing cold. "Break that cowboy. Burn his land if you have to." The courtroom gasped, Karen's smirk fading. I took the stand, my voice steady, telling of the trees she cut, the water she poisoned, the fires she set. "This ain't just my land," I said, eyes locked on Karen. "It's my family, and you ain't taking it." Vance testified, sweating, admitting to her bribes. Earl, shaken but firm, showed his maps, proving her fraud. Holt tried to spin it, called it clerical errors, and called me a violent squatter. But Judge Baxter wasn't buying. She leaned forward, eyes like knives. "This is a criminal land grab," she said, her voice cut in the air. "The deed is void. Pine Ridge HOA is banned from this property, and I'm referring this to the FBI for fraud, racketeering, and arson." Her gavel slammed, the sound like thunder. The courtroom roared, folks cheering, hats flying. Karen's face went white, her pink blazer wilting. Holt bolted, and deputies grabbed Karen as she tried to slip out, cuffs snapping on her wrists. I walked out of that courthouse, rain soaking my Stetson, Clara clapping my shoulder. "You did it, cowboy," she said. I nodded, my voice low. "For Ellie, for Daddy." Karen was indicted that week, caught at the airport with $200,000 and a ticket to Belize. The FBI tore into Pine Ridge, finding millions in laundered money, fake fines, and shell companies. Her board collapsed, their clubhouse shuttered, their signs torn down. I rode home, the orchard quiet under the stars, Buck trotting beside me. The burned trees were scars, but the land was mine, free and clear. I planted new saplings that spring, my hands in the dirt, feeling Ellie's smile, Daddy's pride. I stood under her favorite tree, touching its bark. "We held it, darling," I whispered. "We held it." Karen thought she'd break me. She learned what happens when you cross a cowboy with nothing to lose. If you're fighting your own Karen, don't bend, don't break. Load your guns and charge. This is John Harrison, and you're watching HOA Karen Files. Toss your stories in the comments, subscribe, and let's keep these snakes running scared.